Yeah, well, I'm going to start with my grandfather in Santa Cruz. And vaguely remember him, but had had a few encounters with him at a time. I was only like 6.5 years old when we moved to Fresno, and he'd already passed away. But I did know I heard a lot of stories about him. He was quite the guy, you know. He was a typical Italian guy with the big hat and, you know, the big Italian cigars and that kind of thing. And a pretty heavy drinker kind of a guy, you know, as they all did in those days. But one kind of a fun story is there was a little restaurant, small bar restaurant in Santa Cruz, and that's where he used to hang out with his buddies. My Camarota grandmother lived with us when I was a young guy in Fresno, took care of me while my parents were both working when they opened up their first restaurant in Fresno. Of course, she was able to tell me a lot of stuff, but he used to hang at this bar, so I came to that bar one night or afternoon. My grandmother brought me to see him. This is more than I don't remember this, but apparently she said, Louis, meet Jimmy, you know, your grandson, or talk to Jimmy, whatever it was. And I said in Italian at that time, which I don't speak Italian, a word of it, but I said, it's very nice to meet you, but I'm out of money. That's what they told me. They taught me that saying, you know, in Italian. And apparently he was so taken by that saying that he took his big hat and he stomped on the ground with it. He says, oh my God, my grandson speaks Italian. Well, that was far from the truth, except that my grandmother did give me a little bit of a tutorial on what to say before I got there. So that was kind of the most memorable thing that they tell me about that I did. And you know, again, like I said, I very, very vaguely remember him. At that age, you know, you kind of remember your grandparents if you were around them a lot. I wasn't around him a lot, but I briefly remember seeing him on the boardwalk one time, you know, in Santa Cruz when my parents took me there, and he was there. So that's about as far as I go with my grandfather. My grandmother, on the other hand, my other grandfather passed away at a very early age, before I was even born. My other grandmother I lived with, basically, for a long, long time. And when my parents moved to Fresno, we lived with her sisters, two sisters, and me. And so I got well acquainted with that side of the family. On my father's side, the Pardini side, they came from Lucca. They lived in Lucca, Italy. And my grandfather came here at a relatively young age. My grandmother was actually English, and he came here at a young age and found odd jobs, you know, as most of them did, and eventually settled in San Francisco, Burlingame area. He actually had he had a degree in bookkeeping. He did bookkeeping. So he went to work for a company called the Coast Drum and Box Company. And that company, eventually he worked his way all the way up to owning that company. And that what they did for a living was they manufactured what they call shook boxes, which is thin wood veneer, you know, that they used to haul peas and things like that, and wire baskets. Of course, they didn't have any of the packing on the ranch like they do today, you know, and that kind of thing. So that's kind of where he got, you know, his start in business and stuff like that, and very successful. I think the reason that my dad didn't stay with my grandfather's business was he wasn't that interested in that particular industry, although he did work there for several years in advance of the time. Then a friend of his from Santa Cruz, who actually was the general manager of the Santa Cruz Hotel, which had a big restaurant and all that kind of stuff, talked him into going into partners in his first restaurant in Santa Cruz. The Colonial Inn was the name of the restaurant. It was quite a place. It was a very kind of popular restaurant, and they featured smorgasbord. I don't know if you know what smorgasbord is, but all kinds of foods. And the smorgasbord, what's amazing and to talk about that in today's world is that the smorgasbord was like a pre-dinner event, you know. It cost about $1.50, I think, or something like that, or less, and went up to a $3 steak dinner. That was 1948 is when he started that business. My dad met my mom in Santa Cruz. She was on vacation there with like all the other beach girls used to do, with a couple of her friends that my dad knew apparently, and then they introduced my mom to my dad, and they hit it off, and they were married in 1945, I think. Well, he just had gotten discharged from the Army. He was a master sergeant in the Army, and he was a big, tall, good-looking guy, and I guess my mom just went goo-goo over him, and therefore they hit it off, and they were married for over 55 years when they both passed at a relatively early age. My dad, Al, and my mother, Mary Jane, had decided to move to Fresno, and because my mother was originally from Fresno, and her family was a Camarota family, and her mother and father were Mushkitan. So they had a lot of their family here in town, and there's still a few of them left here and there. And every year that they have that St. Elia picnic, that's kind of where my grandmother's roots came from. And she did a lot of that stuff, the procession around St. Alphonsus, you know, and all that. So there was a lot of Italian around me my entire life. There was an opportunity here for him for a restaurant, and they bought a restaurant out on Highway 99 called the Town and Country Lodge, which they did not buy the hotel part, they just bought the restaurant part of it. And it was a very, very popular spot in the old days. It had a great restaurant and a great bar, and they had dancing, and it was a very popular restaurant. In fact, a lot of the salesmen that used to come to town would go check into the Town and Country, go out and do their business, and then get right back to the Town and Country because there was so much going on there. It was a fun place, you know. I guess you'd call it in those days continental cuisine, so it had a little bit of everything. They specialized in steak, and they also had the smorgasbord at the Town and Country, and that came to Fresno for the first time, and that's what made it so popular. There was so many people from Fresno that used to go to Santa Cruz and go to dinner at the Colonial Inn, and then when he came to Fresno, he had a head start. Plus my mother had a pretty large family here too, so that helped keep things rolling in the beginning, and then it became very popular. My sister and I were born prior to that. When we moved here, I lived with my grandmother and my aunts, and we lived by Our Lady of Victory. So I went to Our Lady of Victory School. Carolyn already had stayed with my parents until she came of age to go to school. Then we moved over to the Fresno High area, and both of us went to St. Teresa's School. It was really kind of a fun time for me. I had an older cousin that also lived at this place, and Alan Goodall is his name, and he is more Italian than I am. I think his name isn't, but he's quite a guy. He specializes in cooking peppers and hanging them, you know, on dry. I don't know if anybody's ever done that around for ages, but it's a wonderful way to do Italian peppers. Well, my dad was very active in the community. He was very active in the Hot Stove League for the baseball, and he was very active in Rotary at Cedar Lanes. He didn't have a lot of time for a lot of outside activities because he was always working. But you know, a lot of stuff that I don't even recall he did for some of the charitable groups, and He fed a lot of the nonprofits and gave them special deals, just like we do today, you know. And so he was pretty active. He was active in the Restaurant Association. And when we built the Fresno Convention Center in the 60s, he was one of the primary guys to get that thing rolling and make it all happen. And in fact, he designed the first kitchen in the Valdez exhibit hall. And so they relied on his expertise quite a bit back in those days. So I'm not sure how long it's been since that opened, but it's been close to 50 years, I think, you know. So, yeah, and he played golf, you know, sometimes quite a bit, sometimes hardly at all, depending on what his schedule was like. He was a very good golfer, involved with the country club and everything. But for the most part, he was a working guy, you know. He also liked to hunt, you know, occasionally, like I do. I grew up hunting and, you know, shotgun hunting, rifle hunting, you know, all that kind of stuff. He'd be pretty uptight right now if he knew all the stuff that was going on with all this gun control and everything else, which is really not the hunter. It's not, you know, it's not hunters. It's really the bad guys that get guns and try to go do things with the guns that they're not supposed to. So, but you know, so he was a big guy. He was very larger than life personality. He spent a lot of time in the back end of his restaurants, but he spent a lot of time in the front end of his restaurants. When he was with Cedar Lanes, he started the Cedar Lanes catering business, which is not exactly like ours was, but very similar. He also started the High Life. He had the High Life restaurant. They bought that together, the partnership. And then they had the Pardinis on Shaw, which was the one in Fig Garden Village. So that was part of that corporation. As soon as that corporation was doing well, he kind of wanted to go out on his own without a partnership. So he sold out of Cedar Lanes Corporation, which owned those three entities. And that's when he built the restaurant out on Shaw in 1971. And we sold it back in 81, and then we actually took it back in 91. Well, my mom was full-blooded Italian, but she didn't cook a lot of Italian food, but she made some wonderful raviolis, and she made great cioppino and spaghetti and that kind of thing. Well, our meals were brief at home because we were not there for the meal. We'd go out to visit my dad, and we'd eat there. But we had some really good stuff. My mom was a very active socially. She was involved with the guilds, you know, the Holiday Guild, one of the other, I'm trying to think of the other guild now too, she was very Infant of Prague. I don't know if you're familiar with that one or not. She was and very active at school. She was involved with the PTA. We didn't have a PTA in those days, but the Mothers Club and, you know, all those kind of things. So she found ways to keep herself busy, and she was, you know, she'd go out and play a little golf once in a while too, you know, and that kind of thing. So that was good for her, and she had wonderful friends. Several of her friends are still alive. She's passed away, but several of her friends are still alive. She passed away at 76 years old. So her life was cut a little short. My dad was 78, you know, and so that was kind of rough. But there's so much more to her that I'm probably not thinking of right now. I mean, she was extremely social, and like I said, they had the Candlelight Guild. She was involved with the Candlelight Guild and all these charitable groups, you know. So she was pretty active that way. When I turned 13 years old, we had already moved out to the area of Palm and San Bruno in Fresno, and we Actually, I went to work after I graduated from 8th grade at St. Teresa's at the Cedar Lanes. See, I haven't got to the Cedar Lanes part yet. My dad, was in partners with the Wathen brothers at Cedar Lanes, and he was the primary restaurant person in that whole organization. And so when I would go help him at age 13. I couldn't wait. I had just got out of the 8th grade and I was excited. It wasn't a job that I had to have. It was a summertime job because I did a lot of athletic things, a lot of sports and stuff in school too. So they didn't force me to work. I just wanted to go to work, and that's kind of where I cut my teeth at Cedar Lanes. Enjoyed working, always have. I went to San Joaquin Memorial as a freshman, and I did quite a bit of activities there. When I was there, I played 3 sports, 3 different sports, not all at the same time, but I was a basketball player. I was also a swimmer, and I played a little bit of baseball too. But I had a great time in high school. I enjoyed my friends, and we were just telling my son, he went fishing, in deep sea fishing, and I remember as a sophomore, one of my friends' dad took us deep sea fishing over to Morro Bay, and we caught tuna, and I was one of the only ones that went fishing that didn't get seasick. But overall, I was just a guy. I had a great car. I do a little drag racing at times. I had some things that I probably shouldn't have done, and a lot of things that I was happy to do. I always wanted to work, though. I never shied away from work. I didn't work that much during school, but I worked a lot summers and vacation times and stuff like that. I was a relatively fair basketball player, I'd say. In those days, I'm 5'11", and nowadays if you're not 6'6", you're not gonna get it. But I'm 5'11", and I played kind of a swing forward position. And my swimming was one of my major sports in school. I was pretty good, and our team won the Valley one year that I was on that swim team. And I was an individual medley and breaststroker back in those days. I was a skinny kid, so I didn't do much football because my legs aren't big enough to carry me that far, even though I did injure myself playing football. But it wasn't a varsity football game that I injured myself. I don't know how to say much about what I did because I just went through school like everybody else, I had a nickname in school, and it was Block. And the reason my nickname was Block is, you remember the Block M was our Letterman's jacket, and I was the only 4-year Letterman in my class, and that was because of the swimming. But I really did, like I said, Memorial was a great move for me, and has been for my children also. And I don't know, that's about it on that part of it, Memorial is a great school, and I would recommend that for anybody that is in Fresno. Moving forward, I graduated from Memorial and I went on to college. I actually went to Menlo College for the first 2 years. They have a business school there, and I went to Menlo College, but it's a 2-year college. So I got an AA degree from there, and then I went to Fresno State, and I graduated in social science with an emphasis on political science. And I always thought maybe I might want to be some kind of a politician or something like that, but that wasn't in the cards for me at all, thank God. So that's my college was great too. I mean, at Fresno State, when I was at Fresno State, I was involved heavily. I did not join a fraternity there or anything like that because I entered in my junior year. But I had some really fun classes. I did an enology, which was really interesting to me, and business, of course, was more my emphasis. But I had some fun teachers back then that used to come to the restaurant because I was working in the restaurant at the time. So I met a lot of great people. After graduating from Fresno State, obviously I got married, so I needed to get a job. And my dad had some restaurants, and I went to work for him 6 months after I graduated, and after I went to work for him, he sold out of all the restaurants. So I was out of a job. So I actually went to work for Patrick James. Pat was opening up his first store in Fig Garden Village. I had worked for Pat briefly in high school. You know how you bring in a few high school kids to help out selling socks and ties, and of course I knew everybody in town from my dad's business, so I did that. So I asked Pat, I said, do you need anybody to help open up his store? I said, my dad's gonna open up and build another restaurant pretty soon, but I don't know how long it's gonna be. So in the meantime, I did. I went to work at Patrick James and did well. In fact, Pat even offered me a permanent full-time job. He said, you could do pretty well in this business if you wanted to do it. And I said, no. I said, I think I want to be in a restaurant. So I want to go work in the restaurant. I said, my dad's going to build another restaurant. Mind you, I was only about, I don't know, I was 22 or 3 years old at the most. Not even that, 22. And so I ended up working for Pat for quite a while to help open up that store that's the original one. Well, that's not the original one, but the one that's on the corner of Palm and Shaw. So that was a fun thing for me. I enjoyed the clothing business, I did. And it was kind of a good thing, if you talk to people and enjoy them. And I knew a lot of these wives that had husbands that I knew over the years, and they'd come in and say, well, do you think this would look good on Fred, or do you think this is good? I go, oh yeah, I think it'll look great on him. But then I needed to make more money. I mean, I was only making about maybe $2.50 an hour. That's how long ago that was. Well, I graduated from Fresno State in '68. So look at the minimum wage and everything in those days. So in the meantime, Joe Wyrick and Bud Hill had built Palm Lakes. So they asked me if I would like to go to work there, because I had a little bit of bartending experience from the High Life. I worked there, briefly. And they needed a bartender. And I said, and we also need somebody to kind of run the bar. I go, well, good luck. I mean, I'll try. So I did. I went to work there, and that lasted until my dad finished his restaurant on Clovis Avenue, which was about 1967, I think, something like that. Anyway, long story short, I went to work at Pat's, and then Dad finished the restaurant. I went to work over there, and I just tended bar. That was my job. My job was tending bar. And I did pretty well. You could make a few tips. They were paying me $3 an hour, so it wasn't too bad. And then when I went to work at my dad's place, Vito Guido, do you remember Vito? Little Vito Guido, he was like 5'3", And my dad built this bar, and it's a beautiful bar, but he put what they call the speed rails about that high, so he could get in. I said, Dad, I'm a little taller than that, but it worked out. And I enjoyed that part of the business. And then when he built the restaurant, Pardini's, on Shaw, I stayed there at Clovis Avenue, and I worked that, and I ran that restaurant until about 1976. And in 1976, Charlie Chitchin bought Pardini's on Clovis Avenue, and I moved over to Pardini's on Shaw. In the meantime, at Pardini's on Shaw, we started up another catering business, very similar to what we are today. And it was very successful. My dad was a hard worker, and he taught me everything I needed to know about catering. He was very particular about food and fresh food at a big event, and that was our basic. That was pretty much our forte. And so we started out there, and we did a lot of catering, and that's when I kind of liked the catering business and enjoyed it, and learned everything I could learn about that. In the meantime, he's ready to sell out again. So he sold out in 1981, and I turned around and said, he said, well, what are you going to do? I said, well, there's no more restaurants left for me, so I think I'll just go and open up a catering company. And that's what I did. I went and rented a warehouse building, built a kitchen inside of it, had a real nice storage area and walk-in boxes, and did all that, and strictly did catering. And my inheritance from my dad for that was 2 old trucks and about 400 place settings of chip china, and that's where I started. That's where my whole thing started. And I went to the bank. I borrowed more money than I'd ever borrowed in my life to do the rest of the work. My time in the catering provided me with some opportunities, and I brought 2 franchises to Fresno. One was Tony Roma's, which was a really, really fun restaurant, ribs and stuff like that. And then I also brought Rubio's to Fresno, was the first franchisee for them. They didn't have franchisees at the time, they just were company owned. So those 2 places gave me quite a bit of experience in the restaurant business. And I had other restaurants. I don't know if you remember the Players on Maroa there, the Players restaurant. I had a partner in that, George Sorrentos, who was owner of the 500 Club, and he actually talked me into going into that place, and there was a few deals like that along the way. As far as the catering side of things go, it just kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And we really did things the way we thought were the right way to do it. And we had some pretty good opportunities being so visible in the community. We were able to do a lot of the nonprofit work over the years. Both my sons graduated from Loyola Marymount University, Jimmy and Jeff. One of them had his eyes on being a chef, and an Italian chef. And he's got some great recipes, and he's been to Italy 8 times. The other one's been to Italy about 5 times. And Jimmy speaks fluent Italian. Jeff, on the other hand, doesn't. But they love Italian food, and they really enjoy that venue, that thing. They've opened up a couple of restaurants. One is called the Annex Kitchen. That was the original for my son, Jimmy. He had come home from living in LA. He met the girl of his dreams and brought her to Fresno. They got married. His brother said to me, Dad, Jimmy's a good chef, and I didn't realize it, because he went to work at a place in LA that's very, very popular. It's called Osteria Mozza, and Mario Batali and Nancy Silverton were the owners. And Nancy is probably now a bigger name than Mario is, but she's not on TV like he was. And so, he had a lot of experience, and he worked right under her. He got there, he became a prep guy in the beginning, and then he advanced very quickly with her over the years, and he was there for almost 5 years. Yeah, and had wonderful training. She took him under her wing, and he taught him a lot. My other son, Jeff, he worked with us throughout the years. But then when he came home after he graduated, he had an interest in catering. So we put him to work there. And then all of a sudden, I got a wild hair and decided we should be in the concession business too. So in the meantime, I had been talking to several people at the fairgrounds, and they asked me if I was interested in taking a concession contract there, which we did. And we also took the Fresno State concession contract for football and baseball and softball. And then we've been the master concessionaire for the Fresno Convention Center and caterer for the last 20 years. So it's been quite a ride. Now here in 2022, we've got several entities that we're very successful with. My son's got 2 Italian restaurants, and one is called an Annex, the Annex Kitchen. And that's because it was built onto the side of our restaurant. Then he wanted to do another restaurant, which is called Annesso, which Annesso is Italian for annex. So that kind of folded into the whole family thing. Jeff, on the other hand, is busy taking care of all the concession stuff and catering, helping with catering. I'm very, very proud of my boys. I'm actually at the point where I'm trying to retire. I don't know if that day is going to come, but we've expanded so much that it's very difficult in 2022 to do almost anything in expanding because of the whole situation of the economy and the people that don't want to work anymore, and that kind of thing. That's not the brightest statement, but it's true. So it's given me some second thoughts over the years. But I feel like, as a whole, we've been very, very well accepted by the community. I've been the president of the Convention Bureau. I've been the president of the Chamber of Commerce. I'm a former president of the California Restaurant Association. I don't know why I think I need to be president of everything, but it's just part of the deal. I'm the only one dumb enough to take those jobs. But it's been, a long journey now. So I've enjoyed my business a lot, and I've had a million different jobs in the restaurant business, from serving to being able to be a dishwasher, to being able to be a chef, and do all those kinds of things. I feel like we've been very successful over the years. That I'm very comfortable in my skin. I'm very happy with all the stuff we've done, and so, here I am.